There was the last normal day, the last day that things were the way they were before they weren't anymore.
We kind of all rushed out of the house and said a quick goodbye. And, little did I know that would be the last time I hugged my mom.
He yells and tells me he's getting ready to go. He said, I'm okay. Just stay here. I'll be home in a few hours. We tell him bye and he leaves. That was the last time we ever saw him.
It's like the minute that helicopter hit the air, it just hit me what I was watching, because I knew he wasn't coming home and he knew he wasn't coming home.
For me, I took it more personally because I'm a nurse practitioner, and why can't I save him? I can help all these other people, and why can't I save him?
They're telling us that it was time, we needed to make a decision, we need to go ahead and just take him off the ventilator. And I was like, how do we know?
One thing I like to tell people is that if you lose somebody to COVID, your need to talk about the person you lost will outlast other people's desire to hear about it.
We make sure that our family members and loved ones' memories lived on. That's really important to me, is that people don't forget. I don't want to forget any of it.
So talk about them. Talk about them till people are sick of hearing about them. Because as long as you're still talking about them, they're never far away.
And the last thing that my mom said is, she said, when you get to heaven, we will look for each other.
Hello everyone, you're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. Today, I'll be talking to Patty in Connecticut. Patty lost her husband Frank to COVID on April 22nd, 2020. He was 52 when he died, and their wedding anniversary was just a few days after he passed away. In this show, Patty talks about her regrets and how much she struggled with not being able to be in the hospital with her husband. For context, we recorded this episode on February 14th, 2023. Patty also talks about how she and her children honor Frank by telling his story and keeping his memory alive through the Yellow Heart Memorial and the Rami's Heart COVID-19 Memorial. Those links are in the show notes below. And with that, I'd like to welcome Patty to the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you live in Connecticut.
Yes.
And today we are talking about your husband who passed away in April of 2020?
Yes, that's correct.
And what was his name?
His name's Frank.
Frank. So where I start most episodes is in March of 2020. So I'm just going to go ahead and start there, since your husband passed away early in the beginning part of the pandemic, and just talk about like how you first heard about COVID and what happened, like the changes you made, how it affected your life, your work, your husband's work, things like that.
Okay. So we first were hearing of the virus towards like the middle of end of March. And everything was just so uncertain and unclear what exactly was happening. I actually work in healthcare. So I was I worked in a doctor's office. So my husband worked for a private contractor. So he worked outdoors. And we started at the RO office, we started to not see patients and to cancel patients out. So we stopped seeing the patients. We then started wearing masks and taking taking our temperatures, one of the medical assistants, and we were just logging that and just making sure that we're taking the right precautions in the office. And I just remember at that time, everybody was worried, and who, we would report back like who did what the night before. So we're all kind of trying to be honest on what, who was out, who did what, so we all know if anyone was, I don't know, I guess got sick or something like that. Just to be honest with each other as coworkers. But I remember at the time, the office manager actually was not feeling too good, and her husband had just returned from business from Italy, and that's when Italy was one of the countries that was affected first, I think. So she was coming into the office, so a couple of us, including myself, started to not feel good, and she had actually stopped working. So she stopped working and she wasn't coming to the office. So we were all questioning where she was, and then came out that she was COVID positive. And I started to not feel good, and a couple other girls started to not feel good. And, we kept asking if we can work from home or take time off, and they kept telling us, no, you can't. Everyone's fine, everyone's okay. And I was going home, being really, really careful. I was undressing in our laundry room, showering. I was, even wearing a mask in the house, just to protect us all, my kids, my husband. And I just remember, like, my husband actually was visiting his father in the hospital because he was in the hospital for a different reason, and they were not testing him at the time, his father. So my husband just, so we don't know what happened, how it just came about in our house. But I mean, obviously I did get sick and I did test positive in the beginning of April, and my husband started getting symptoms too. And then from there we were actually home sick about a week. And that was like the beginning of April.
So you both, probably from separate places, ended up getting COVID around the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Because I most likely think that I contracted it through, which was probably the office manager, because we stopped seeing patients, and we weren't, and she was the only one who really tested positive first in our office, even though other people were sick in the office, like had colds, and and then my husband, I don't know, he was just the easiest going guy. So, like, I'm sure he was touching the elevator, going up and down, opening doors. He's like, yeah, I don't gotta wash my hands, I'm good. He was just always that easygoing guy. So we just, we did what the doctors told us to do, to quarantine separately in our house, and that's it. And it was in the beginning, so nobody really knew anything, and we just followed what they were telling us to do in the beginning.
Yeah. Were the lockdowns in Connecticut, like, I haven't never talked to anybody who was there. Were they, do you feel like strict enough? Was there, when did masks become required, things like that?
I think, like, it was like towards, I'm going to say, the end of, like, the second to last week maybe of March, the schools started closing down and the kids were starting to be remote. The hospitals started closing down, doing a lockdown. And then I think masks were starting to wear masks. Well, we did in the office. We started wearing masks and gloves, and I don't remember exactly when the masks started becoming like mandatory, but it was early on. I remember it was early on. Sometimes it seems like it was yesterday, and then sometimes it seems like it was just such a far time away.
Yeah, I understand that. So, what happened once you both had COVID and you were at home and quarantining separately? What happened?
So basically, we my husband stayed upstairs, and I stayed downstairs, and my kids pretty much stayed in their room. Um, I we had completely different symptoms. I was bringing him, breakfast, lunch, dinner. I was kind of going up and down. He didn't want to come out of the room because he didn't want to get the kids sick, and he didn't want to get me more, because he had like a cough, and I didn't have the cough, but I had very different symptoms, and then it just came to I remember it was a Friday morning, and when I had gone upstairs, I was opening up the curtains, the shades, and we were talking a little bit, and I could see like he just didn't seem right, and I just said, "Are you okay? Do you feel different today?" And well, actually, let me back up. During the week, he had kind of developed this cough, and so I had him call his doctor's office, and I just think they were just not. I just think maybe they didn't know what to do. I don't know what they were doing, but they just they said, okay, someone will get back to you. Then finally someone got back to him and said, we're going to just call in some cough medicine for you. And I was like, wow, don't even want to see you, take a chest x-ray, antibiotics, something. I mean, you've been home now. And they knew, because in the beginning when I had to go take a COVID test, he called his doctor, and the doctor said, well, if she's sick and she's positive, you can just think that you are too. And I was like, okay, I guess so. By the time I was so sick those first several days that, I wasn't really concentrating as much, because usually I'm very like on top of all this stuff. So then he started becoming sick, and then he ended up getting the cough medicine. And it seemed like it helped him, because he's like, yeah, I know, I feel better. And he was up talking on the phone to people and his boss. And then I just remember that Friday morning, I went up there, and I'm like, oh, did you take your pills, your cough medicine? And how do you feel? He's like, he seemed a little bit more out of it. So I made him call his doctor on his phone and, put him on speaker, and he wasn't there. And so the doctor on call was like, oh, just, take him to the emergency room if you don't think something's not right, or call 911. So he's like, yeah, just drive me. He's like, it's fine, like he just was very easygoing about it. So took him to took him to our local hospital. And that was just, that was horrible. So we pulled in, and the whole way there, we're talking, and I'm like, you're okay, everything's gonna be all right. We'll just get really checked, and the nurse came out, or I guess one of the nurses came out with a wheelchair as I pulled into the emergency room, and she just came out and she took him, and then I was, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna come in too, and she's like, oh, you can't, we can only just take, him, the patient. And she just asked me for a little bit of information, and I was like, well, I've already tested positive. I'm like, what's the difference? And she's like, well, just stay here for a few minutes. And she came back, and she said, the doctors, they can't let you in. She's like, but we'll give you a call. And just watch. And just watch him. Just watching her, just, take my husband away. And I hugged him and I told him I loved him and I said, it'll be okay. I'll be back. I'll come back. Just get checked out and then I'll be back. And I just stayed in the parking lot for a little bit. And then I just was like numb and I just, I cried and I got back home and, I told my kids that, he was just going to get checked and everything will be okay. And waited for a call, which seemed like hours. But in the meantime, he texted me and after a while and he's like, oh, are you still in the parking lot? And I said, no, the nurse told me to go home. Are you okay? He's like, yeah, no, I feel better. And I was like, oh, good. All right. Well, maybe I'm going to come pick you up then soon. And, we texted a few times and, he's like, oh, how are the kids? Kids okay? Like, it was always making sure, like, we're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I didn't hear from him for a while. He texted a little bit at that time and just was like, crying nice, hey, I love you, hang in there. And the kids, texting him and stuff. And I know his friends were reaching out to him. And then it seems like hours later, I got a call from one of the doctors and said that, he tested positive for COVID and he had pneumonia and, they were going to keep him for a little bit. And then later on, I got a call saying that they were going to take him to ICU and keep him overnight, just to check, just because his his oxygen was low and whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. I never thought like I would never talk to him again at that point. And actually, when I think about it now and even after everything, I don't know why, like, they never called me. Like, they never had me speak to him on the phone. Like, I've asked some people and they said, oh, well, normally, when they know what's going to happen going forward, they would have you speak to him on the phone. Never happened. I never got to speak to him on the phone. Then that night, I was just, we called family, we let everybody know and everything. And we just waited and waited. And then they called me, like, I think in the middle of the night, telling me that they put him in ICU. I was like, okay, that's good. And I kept asking if I can come to the hospital. They told me no, I wasn't allowed to. And the next thing I knew was the next day. I didn't sleep. I just stayed awake praying, just with rosary beads in my hands, just praying. The next morning, I got a call from a doctor in the ICU who told me that they had put him on a ventilator.
So they put him on a ventilator without letting you know ahead of time.
Yep. They did not notify me, and I was just like in complete shock. And I was like, why? They told me last night he was fine, and he seemed fine, and I don't know who made that decision and why and who. I don't know. And, unfortunately, we have to trust our healthcare system, but it failed me, unfortunately, and it failed me badly.
Yeah. So how long after that was he in the hospital, and what was the progression of what happened?
So he was in the hospital a total of 12 days. It seemed that, they, in the hospital, I'm sure they were just all learning,
Mm-hmm.
about things and going the best they could with what what information they had, and I do have to believe that because obviously they didn't have a binder that had COVID pandemic from China. It all started, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't have that. So they told me what was what they were doing, medications, and what was happening, and why they put him on the ventilator, and just I don't know. It was just so much like information, and then waiting for the doctors to call you and the nurses, and they had after like a couple of days or a day later, they had told me that his kidneys were failing and they had to do dialysis. I just was blown away. I really was. I actually had, I'm friends with a few doctors, and I had them actually call over there to find out what was really going on, because I kept asking if I can go, and they kept saying no. And they, I'm sure they were telling me the best that they could without telling me the worst of it. And then from there, it just seemed like everything just was going bad. And then actually, after a few days, the doctor had told us. Actually, we set up a telehealth. A video, like a FaceTime with the head of ICU, the doctor there, who was very nice and kind, and we set that up with a few family members and myself, and he just told us the prognosis and what was happening, and what he was seeing going forward. And you can see he got a little choked up, and he was a little teary-eyed, and he saw my husband go in as strong, healthy guy, no underlying conditions, nothing at all, very rarely sick. And he just said that the virus just completely just took over him, over his body, and just like, they were doing everything they could. And it just seemed, and he said that, he's hopeful that, he'll be feeling better or be doing better. But as the week went on, it was just horrible. I mean, we just kept hearing one thing happening after another. And I don't know. I don't even know how it got worse. I'm blaming them putting him on the ventilator. Just made him worse. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just unimaginable. And I prayed so hard for a miracle. I don't even know how. I'm still don't even know how this happened.
Yeah. Did they ever let you in to see him?
They didn't. But after a few days, we had a couple of video calls with the doctor. But after a couple of days, the nurses, who were really great, they got an iPad, and we were able to. They went in the room to do FaceTime with my husband, and unfortunately, my husband was, unconscious. He was in a medical-induced coma, but we were able to just talk to him, and they pretty much let us do it for a while.
Mm-hmm. Were your kids on the FaceTime too?
Yeah, I had my kids. My kids, they did it too. We had a couple family members that did it as well. We were able to just see him. We had the hospital chaplain go in and with some rosary water and do some prayers throughout the week. One of the nurses, she was wonderful. She had us email a whole bunch of pictures to her, and she hung all around the room, and she showed us on the iPad. She's like, "These are all your pictures here."
Yeah.
We have I have a good friend who was a nurse at that hospital. She's not there anymore, but she was there for a very long time on a different unit, and she went to go see him. She went to go see him, and she just told me, she's like, even to today, she's just like, it's just, she's like, it was just horrible how this virus just took over.
Mm-hmm. So he was on the ventilator in the hospital altogether for 12 days. So, and you weren't allowed to go in. So then they must have let you know at some point that you needed to say goodbye or get on FaceTime. How did that happen?
Well, they let us do FaceTime a little bit, and then the doctor, towards the end of, getting close to like day 11 or so, they started telling me that what things will look like, and what things will look like if Frank were to come home, and this is actually a few days before. This is maybe like day 10 or so. They were saying, he was getting worse, and if there was any chance of him to come out of this, what things would look like, and he wouldn't. I don't even want to share it. It was just very heartbreaking to hear that. He just wouldn't be himself. He wouldn't be him. It would just be a very different life if he would even to come out of this. So when they took him off, like, his medications, like his blood pressure was going up, it was going low. He went into cardiac arrest. Like, so much had happened. He wasn't coming out of that medical induced coma that they put him on, and there was lack of oxygen going to the brain, and just so much had happened. Then the doctor just said that, you might want to have this conversation with the family and start thinking of, I guess they were trying to tell me, that, it's not going to happen anymore. I don't even know. I don't even know what he was trying to tell me. But I just remember that, we talked to everyone, and, we said that we wanted his body to tell us what he wanted to do.
Mm.
I didn't want to make any kind of decision. And that's what we did. So we told the doctor that, we're going to wait. We're not going to do anything. And then they let us FaceTime him, again every night. We did. And then that was it. On the 22nd, they called us that night, and they told us that he had passed away.
Oh.
Yeah. They called and they said that, I didn't even know how to tell my kids.
How old are your children?
Well, now they are, they're 19, 25, and 27. My youngest, she still had to graduate high school, so she was remote the rest of the time, the rest of that year, and then, senior year was mostly remote.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the most difficult time of her life to get through, and for all of us, really.
Yeah, I think about, it was a long time ago, but I think about my last couple of years of high school. And as I walked around the neighborhood here in Oregon, there were those signs like senior 2020, senior 2021. And I always thought about kids that age and how heartbreaking it was just to lose that community that you have at school. And then for your daughter to also lose her dad at the same time, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was hard. We went through a lot, but I have to say her high school, the counseling and everyone was fantastic. They were by our side and by her side every single day.
Good.
They really were. I mean, our community was just unbelievable. The outreach that we've had by people that, we knew, but never knew how much someone can just go out of their way for someone that they, just know or they heard what happened. And um, the community was just wonderful to us, and for my kids, the support was really great.
Good. So, were you able to have a funeral or memorial service for your husband?
Um, we did a small funeral for him because the funeral home told us we were only able to do they were only allowed to have a certain amount of people at the time because it was still, well, actually it was May. At this point now it's the beginning of May. And that's what we did. We had a very small funeral at the funeral home, just the family, a small service, and then we went on to the cemetery, and we were greeted there by like a lot of people, like his cousins and some friends had met us there. His entire work was there with all the trucks, and all the trucks that he used worked, and it was really nice. They were all there at the cemetery, and so we were just able to have that. Nobody was really getting together, so we didn't really do anything. And I think that's one of the hard parts people don't understand is that, we were in our house by ourselves. Like my mom couldn't come over. I couldn't have, nobody would come over. People would drop stuff off or have things delivered to us. But just grieving alone, like no one just to hug you, to hold you.
Mm-hmm. There's a definite isolation to losing someone, and I feel like losing someone early in the pandemic, especially in that first year, it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain how difficult it is to just be in your house and know that this thing happened, but you can't get the normal comfort that you get from, a hug and someone sitting on the couch and like your mom holding your hand and,
Yeah, I mean, just having company or having people over and
yeah.
being able to, be together or look through photos or do things, and we didn't have that. And that was very hard. And just, not being able to even go to the hospital to see him. And I kept telling the doctors and the nurses, but if I'm there, at least he'll feel me, he'll hear me. Maybe he'll wake up and it'll be okay. They just kept telling me that they couldn't, let anybody in.
Yeah.
That's the worst way to go.
Yeah. So looking back, because it's been almost 3 years, looking back, do you still feel anger? Did you feel anger for a while? Frustration, like especially that first year, like the grief of it all. And then just, I think, like the difference between how it is in the last year or so and how it was at the very beginning of the pandemic. Do you experience like anger and looking back and have regrets?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely anger. I have a lot of anger of what happened, how everything was handled. Um, I have a lot of anger in that. And, it's just, I'm trying to do better with it, I mean, now, but yeah, it's, I have a lot more anger. As far as regrets, yeah, part of me thinks, why did I even bring him to the hospital? Why did I go to that hospital? I mean, yeah, I, I, I do regret that.
Yeah. Just having him stay home with you.
I don't know. I mean, I think about it now. I'm like, what were the other options? I could have went the other direction, went to a different hospital. Maybe that something would have happened better there. I know better. I don't know. I don't know if they would have known better. Maybe they wouldn't have jumped and put him on a ventilator right away. I don't know. And I'll never really know what really happened. I'll never really know what really happened in that hospital. At what they just did what they had to do, and I understand that. But you'll never really know.
Yeah. Did you request his medical records?
I did. I have them.
And that didn't help, like with the any kind of clarity of knowing, or it just felt more detached?
It clarified some things, but not really a lot, because, his comments in the beginning were, "Oh, I'm fine, I feel better," and those were in the notes. So that's kind of disappointing to read those now, to know that, he was telling the nurse or whomever was taking his, is saying that he felt better, and that was all through the emergency room visit. He's like, "No, I can sit up. I feel better. I'm not out of breath." But they unfortunately went on and did what they thought they needed to do without consulting me. Maybe they got his permission. I don't know. They must have. I don't know. They must have asked him, and he said, "Yeah, okay." I don't know. I have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you tell your kids? And yeah, it's very hard.
And so, did you go back to work in healthcare?
I did it for a while. I took a leave of absence, and I did go back to work in healthcare, unfortunately, and I had support from um, my own doctor, really, and doctor friend, and they're always, they want to encourage you to do, to continue and the best you can. And I think that, um, part of me was like, I shouldn't go back into healthcare because, I was very passionate about it, and I'm passionate about what I did. But because I feel like it failed me, the healthcare system, I didn't want to go back into it. But I know how my husband was, and he always had a very positive look on things, life, and always found the good in everything. And I thought to myself, you know what, I'm just going to try to go back and see how I feel. And I'm going to do it because I know he would want me to. So I did go back. I mean, it's not, in the beginning, it was very difficult. It was very difficult because, you're in healthcare and all you hear about is this continuous, horrible virus. But I isolated myself a lot. I was very alone, and but we just I tried to just do what I can now, and to make the best of it for now.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that because I know when we spoke on the phone, you talked about how you still feel very isolated, even almost 3 years later. So first, what I want to talk about is one thing that I ask a lot of people is that first year, like when you come to March or April when you first got sick, and then like the days of taking him to the hospital. Did you go through an experience of reliving that? And if not, like how did you work through especially that first year and those milestones which are so hard?
Yeah, it was definitely hard the first year. I definitely didn't want to be out, isolated myself. I mean, really, nobody was really going out anyway. Um, so when our anniversary is in April, and I remember that when the doctor was telling me that he wasn't doing good towards the end, and I had told him, I said, "Oh my God," I said, "we had just talked about, how we're going to celebrate our anniversary this year and everything," and I said, "Please, let him come home. I said, don't let anything happen because our anniversary's coming up. And yeah, I could tell the doctor was upset when I told him that. I can hear it in his voice. But he died just, a few days before our anniversary, our 28th anniversary. So so yeah, so every year, when holidays, that especially that first year, it was very difficult. I didn't want to know that it was a holiday. I didn't care what it was. I didn't do anything. I didn't I just we just kept very low key. My kids were not really into anything. They didn't want to celebrate their birthdays or the holidays or anything. But we did everything to honor Frank. We did I do a lot to honor him every day and every year, and I do a lot to do that for him. Just to keep his memory alive with everyone, and especially with us, our kids. I don't have to show people. I do what I do for myself and for me to feel good about it. For my husband, I'm very private. I'm not someone who, has to advertise or, do this or that. I like to share certain things with people. But yeah, and now going into the third year, it hasn't been really any easier. He would have, this January that just passed, he would have been 55. We still my daughter makes him a cake, and
So young. He had a lot of life left.
yeah, he was 52 when he passed. I was 51. I became a widow at 51. Very difficult.
Yeah. And so being a widow and the isolation, do you have people that you talk to about it? Do you have friends? Do you feel like a support, or do you feel like some of your married friends just have taken a step away?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I do have some friends that are married, and we were friends as for a long time, actually, since our kids were young, and we were friends as couples that we did things together, and as families that we did things together. A few of them have definitely stepped away a little bit, stepped back. There's a couple of them that I'm still very close with that we still get together, for lunch or dinner. Sometimes we do walks. But it's not as, as often as it was. And then, I have a couple other friends who are more supportive and understanding.
So what's one thing that you feel like has really helped you move through your grief?
Well, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think that I'm thankful for my children. I mean, they definitely, I see my husband in them, and you know, and having them just really helps me a little bit more than not having, than being alone, I would say. But I don't really know. I think I still find a little difficult in everything. Just being without him, doing things without him. You know, we, in my mind, I still wait for him every night. Yeah, I still hope that he would come through the door.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. No, I'm not really sure it's really hit me yet. And I think it's because, well, one is because I just was never able to be with him while he was sick in the hospital. I took care of him. I did what I could at home, but I wasn't able to be there in the hospital for him.
Yeah. So in a way, it still doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still wait for him to come home. And I think sometimes that gets me through the day.
Yeah. I know you said you were private about it, but have you shared his name and your story with any of the COVID memorials that are out there?
Well, I follow the Yellow Hearts and the Rami's Memorial, the one from New Jersey. I think in the beginning I have shared it short, like a short, small version of my story to their group. But I don't utilize the group as maybe I did in the beginning. I don't.
Yeah. Do you find that people don't want to talk about it anymore?
Yeah, I can say that. I can say people just think that. I think people forget. I don't know if they forget or they're just don't want to acknowledge it, or confront you with it, or have that conversation or say anything. But I talk about my husband all the time. I mean, with my mom, I saw my kids. I'm always referring to him or something that he said or did, or we laugh about certain things that my husband would do. And he was just a great guy. He loved to, oh my God, he loved to sing. He would always have, his country music on and singing in the car with the kids or at home, or he loved to work in the house. Like he would make this beautiful vegetable garden, took such pride in doing that. He would make homemade Italian wine. He would love to give it out, to friends like my son's baseball team. Just great guy. Just did not deserve this at all. No one did. No one deserved to get something like this.
Yeah.
But God did definitely pick the wrong one.
Oh. Why do you say that?
Because he was just a great guy. And there's just, there's so many, don't want to, there's just so many people that got affected by this and are just, their lives are forever changed by this virus. And, there's such bad people in this world. Not that they deserve anything, but it's just horrible to, to think, why us? Why did this happen?
Yeah. So many good people are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They say they take the good ones, but I wasn't ready. My husband wasn't ready.
Yeah. Have you had anybody ask you, especially when you talk about your husband, ask about pre-existing conditions or be sort of callous or rude about it?
Um, not really. I mean, people in the beginning had asked me just in general, because I guess that's what was being said is, oh, did he have any pre-existing conditions? I mean, that was what was being said is and known as if they did, then that was one thing that would, may contribute to being as sick as maybe, he was or but nothing, no one was really, pushing on the subject, no.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I mean, when somebody is younger, and you said he was 52 when he passed away, there can be people that ask questions like, well, they think, well, there must have been something wrong. He must have had some sort of health condition. There's something going on. I think it's hard for people to just accept that this virus was and is, it just comes in, and there are people that for no reason that seems likely at all, just completely overwhelmed by it. It just takes them out.
Yeah.
And your husband went through a lot of different things in the hospital that, it just seems like it got in and it just went everywhere.
Yeah.
There is one question that I ask everybody at the end of each episode, and that is, what do you say to people who tell you that COVID isn't real?
Well, I've never really had anyone say that to me directly.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't accept that, but I think that if, for people who do think that or were saying that, they just haven't experienced what I have experienced, what my children have experienced, or what over 1 million people have experienced. They don't have experience. Even if they've caught COVID and had a mild case of it, or now they're being treated with medication or whatever, they have no clue what COVID is, really. I'm sorry to say that it's a very dying with COVID, and heaven is just very different. And I've talked to people who have lost somebody, like a mother, a grandmother, someone to COVID, and they agree too. It's completely different than someone who, unfortunately passed away with diabetes or cancer or something. It's just it's a different thing. It's a different, and it's completely different. I don't know if you think that, but it's a different experience going through the loss of a COVID, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely experienced that too. My mom was like the closest, most deeply personal loss I've experienced. Her parents passed away when I was in my teens, and then my grandma passed away. I was probably about 30, but I knew them and I spent time with them, but I watched my mom grieve that, and I was more, as a young person, just trying to be there for my mom. So I don't really have anything to compare it to, but at the same time, I have a lot of friends who've lost people to, like, family members to cancer and other things. And I remember with my grandma, we all got together, we went out to a restaurant, we went back to the house. Like you said, we looked through photographs and we told stories and we laughed, and we got that family time to really grieve. But with my mom, I had to wait 2 weeks before I got her ashes, and I wasn't able to see her. And I still feel like if I drive up to where she was, she's still in there somewhere, because it is different. It's hard to explain, though. Like you said, it's hard to really put into words how different it is to lose somebody to COVID.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's very different, I think. And it's hard to, even if you had to go through it in the beginning, or when you weren't able to have a service or have anything, and you were alone, it impacts you more, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that too. And it's just terrible that anybody passes away from COVID, but there's a part of me that's like, God, I wish I was there. I wish I could have been there with my mom, and it just wasn't possible. So
yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Patty, for sharing Frank's story and for talking to me about you and your family and what you went through.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was something that I really wanted to do. I know it's very hard to talk about it sometimes, just to kind of, but to share it, I think it's just very important for people to understand what we went through, what I went through, my children, how we're left, without a great person in our lives. We honor him in every way, and we do so much. I do a lot to honor him in our community. And I think that's important for people to do.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we're able to have you to let us do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast, and if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is in the show notes below. And if you're still listening, and thank you so much if you are, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, please rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.